Vintage Audio Attic, repair and restoration. Alright, about ready to load up the tapes. Guess I'll start up here with the Sony Elcaset EL7. You can see the tape's pretty good sized here. I've got some cassettes down here on the table. They're going into the cassette decks, obviously. But there's a pretty big size difference between them. So let's hit the eject button, and this deck, the tape loads up. Most decks they load down, but the tape loads pointing up. And let's see, we got her in there. We'll shut her. That looks pretty good. And let's push the play button and see what we get. Well, what do you know? We got some music. Alright, we'll stop him so I don't play something too long. You know how that goes. Let's see. Okay, the Dragon. And I think I got the regular cassette. Let's see. Where's my eject button? We'll get that. And we're going to put the Dragon's tape in. And we'll go here with my tape selector. We'll put her down to, that's number 1. So let's put it to 1. Alright, that looks good. And we're going to try to play it. So I'll hit the play button. Well, what do you know? She's playing too. I hope I didn't go too long. I just wanted to show how the Dragon aligns itself. You may have noticed that flashing arrow. It does a quick test to line itself up the best for the best playback. So there's the Dragon. Now we'll go to the Nakamichi Lx5. We'll get his tape. Again, another standard cassette. Get him in there. And I've got him hooked up here to my tape selector to 2, so I just got to move that to 2. And he ought to start playing. Let's see. Let's go with the play on him. Yep. Again, we'll stop it before we go too long. And then down here is the Pioneer CTF 1000. It's a little bit different. You know, the other decks kind of have your standard doors. This one has a cover over the heads. You see that, how it comes down? There's really nothing here, and the cassette sits out in the open when it's playing. But you pull that down, and then you take the cassette and you kind of put it up, its top part in first, and just kind of firmly fit it. And that'll start the capstan running, or it should. And we ought to have some music there. But first, what do I have to do? I got to move my selector here. So let's go to 3. And let's go to play. Okay, he's at the beginning somewhere, I hope. Let's see. Oh yes, I can. There he goes. Alright. I'll shut him down. He's playing. Okay, well, there's those 4. Now I'm going to go over here to the Nakamichi, to the 1000 DAT deck. Here's a DAT tape. I think you can see it, maybe. One thing about this DAT, it is extremely quick loading and unloading. So it's a side door. You see on this one, it's a side. So you just stick it in there and she'll go right on in. And this thing loads and unloads extremely fast. And I'll try to show that. Well, let's just close her up for now. And you can't really see in the drive mechanism how quick that is. It only takes it a couple seconds. But we're going to go ahead and let me unload it first. Just watch the eject. I'm going to eject this thing. And then if anybody's got a DAT deck out there, see if yours unloads this fast. there you go. I mean, it's like a second. You know, put it back in. She's low. She's ready to play now. I mean, it's that quick. But you can really see it better on the eject. I'm going to hit the eject button again, and you'll see the tape pop back out pretty darn quick. Start counting 1,000, 2,000, maybe 2 seconds. And that's very, very fast for a DAT deck anyway. But put him in. This guy, I think I'm gonna have to move. I'm using my Sony TA what is it? It's an E901. That's what it is. And what is he in? Oh, I think he's in aux 2. So I got to move him. He's not going to help me with the tape selector. So hopefully you'll hear him play when I hit this. We can go to mode here. Oh, you know what I'm on? Tape monitor. How about going to source, right? That might help. Then again, maybe not. Oh, well, here again. Like I mentioned before, this is a good thing to see. I'm using the 1000p with it, and I also have my 1000 MB hooked to it. So you probably can't see down here, but it says source, and source is actually the CD player's hooked to it. So right now the input to my DAC is the CD player, and that's why you don't hear it. But if I come over here, I'm going to hit the button that says DAT 1, and there you go. So I better stop that before I get in trouble with the copyright folk. So anyway, there's the deal with that. Yeah, when you hook up a bunch of stuff, right? Sometimes it's like, okay, what's hooked to who? Who's hooked to what? You know, and it takes a minute here to get everything going. Now we've got the open reel deck. This is Teac X1000R. Already put the tape in this one because this takes a minute to do, doesn't it? That's one advantage of the other formats with those cartridges. You just plug them in here. You'd be watching me for 45 seconds trying to string the tape through it. So let's hit the play button here. And again, I won't keep it going long. But anyway, this is pretty much all the formats that I grew up with. And really, to be honest with you, I don't even remember an Elcaset deck. You know, I mean, I may have seen one, you know, and I guess that's why that format didn't do very well. I don't even remember it. I know they were fairly expensive, and I probably, if I did see one, I didn't think I could afford it. So, the cassette decks, of course. Most people my age are familiar with those. The DAT decks, you know, they came along in around 87, I think, and you know, they were expensive too, and the tapes were expensive. And open reel's always been kind of expensive and high-end for a home user, right? I mean, kind of like the audiophile, you know, quote unquote, had these. Not every person had a reel-to-reel at home. A lot of people had a receiver, pair of speakers, you know, cassette deck, or, you know, whatever. But not, you know, some had open reels. I did, and a few of my friends did, but not quite as popular as the cassette decks. So really, you can kind of see the eras here. I believe this Pioneer deck was from the late 70s. All silver faced, right? I mean, kind of like what you'd think from 77 or 78 or whatever. And if you come up to the Nakamichi Lx5, this is like early 80s. They're not sure what people are into. It's kind of like the silver is starting to go away, and there's a lot of blackface stuff, but there's still silver stuff. So Nakamichi on this deck decided, I guess we'll go half and half. You know, we'll do a little of both. And then we got the Dragon that was came out in, I believe, like the early 80s, like 82. And this deck was produced for about 10 years unchanged until the early 90s. So that's pretty amazing with any piece of electronics being produced that many years. And also list pricing at $2,500 in 1982. That's crazy. I mean, that's why I didn't own one of these either. And even the Lx5 was an $850 list deck. I guess that's why I didn't own Nakamichis. I had cassette decks, but I had the cheaper ones. You know, I had the Sonys or whatever of the world that were, you know, $300. Elcaset, same thing. This wasn't a cheap deck when it came out. You know, it wasn't too far off $1,000, 800 or something. And the damn tapes are even today expensive, and they were back then. And the format, maybe if it came 5 years earlier, it came out like in 76 or somewhere in there. And cassettes had just gotten, you know, so good. You know, when this Elcaset was developed, they thought, well, maybe we've got a, you know, we can get reel-to-reel performance and, you know, a lot more convenient format, you know, being in a cartridge. But it just never caught on. Decks like the Nakamichis and several others, cassette decks, really, you know, they can do a great job reproducing music. So the Elcaset, maybe if it was 5 years earlier instead of 76, if it was 71 or 2, they would have caught on, but they never did. And the DAT format, same thing. It just came out in the late 80s. Everybody was doing their CD thing. Some manufacturers were worried that, you know, you're going to make high quality copies of your CDs and people weren't going to buy those, but these things were expensive too. Now this particular one was very, very expensive, but even your lesser expensive DAT decks were, you know, when they came out, you know, $1,000, $1,200, and the tapes were very expensive too. And reel-to-reel, you know, it wasn't horribly expensive. I mean, not like those other formats. You know, this X1000R was, you know, I mean, around $1,000 or so, you know, I mean, give or take. You know, you get a couple reels of tape, and, you know, it could get pretty expensive too. So anyway, I just wanted to show all the different tape formats. You know, the cassette, the Elcaset, the DAT, the open reel, all at once. And they'll all do a great job. These have all been refurbished. I've refurbished all of them. At least some of them have had electrolytic capacitors changed, but all the tape decks, like when I got this Pioneer, it was your typical deck sitting in the closet for 20 years. You know, just needed new rubber, and the same thing with the two Nakamichis. You know, they needed new rubber, new idler tires. The Elcaset, he was all locked up, just grease that had turned into glue. You know, and the pinch roller assembly wouldn't move, and so that had to be disassembled. Again, your typical stuff. This DAT deck, I still cannot find a service manual for it, and I was lucky enough to be able to fix it, you know, just by screwing around with it, and it's a long story. You know, I just got very lucky with it, and anybody's got a service manual for a Nakamichi DAT deck, please get a hold of me, and I'll have the check in the mail if you could send me a copy of it. Well, I mean, that's, you know, that's about it. The open reel format, I mean, that, you know, been around a long time, always done a great job. And these other formats, you know, the cassette and the Elcaset, really can rival the open reel performance. And again, all these have been rebuilt, so a lot of times cassette decks get, you know, bad reputations because they're just old and they don't work very well. Like an old car, take a 40-year-old car, it's going to take some work, and 40-year-old electronics, the same thing. So I think I'm going to sit down and I'm going to enjoy some music here. I'm probably going to run them all. I do from time to time. Any type of tape deck, you ought to run it occasionally. You know, I don't even know what that means, right? What's occasionally mean? Certainly get it out and plug it in once every 6 months or a year anyway. I'm not saying that's even ideal, but, you know, just don't let it sit in your closet for 5 years. You know, like anything mechanical, anything that moves, it's just good to use it. So here we go. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to be running this with my this equipment. I've got my Sansui BA5000 in the system, And so here we go for a couple hours. It's going to be a tape fest. Any of the vintage tape formats will do a great job for you. I mean, the Elcaset works great. The cassettes, I mean, they work great. The real key with any vintage equipment is it working properly? And most of it out there isn't. Almost all of it needs work. The DAT decks, they're a lot of fun to play with. They have a lot of features that came well after the cassette decks and Elcaset. The open reel, what can you say? You walk into a room, see one of those, and it's pretty impressive. So I hope you enjoyed the tour of my decks. Visit vintageaudioaddict.com for more repair and restoration tips on your vintage audio equipment.